Today on Comicstorian, Batman has no money and the Huntress has returned to Gotham. This is Comicstorian. I take your favorite comic books, I take out all the fluff plot, I tell you the core synopsis of what is happening, kind of giving you a little bit of a narrative audio drama feel to it, but I do cut out some stuff. If you want to get the full story and a lot of different art and context, make sure you pick up these issues yourself, or you can use our series to know what is going on and get the next issues, whatever you choose to do. Either way, all alterations to the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. Now, this storyline takes place after the Joker War, and I'll link the Joker War down below. But at this point, Batman just doesn't have a lot of money, and a whole new case is cropping up in Gotham. So let's get into that story. As the final guest pulls up into the City Hall district in Gotham City, Mayor Nakano welcomes everyone and thanks them for their investment in making their home a bit safer. Still reeling from the events of the Joker War, Nakano begins to unveil his vision of Gotham, and Bruce already knows that it's just another money grab to get more support for his anti-vigilante movement. However, as he begins to go into the details of his plans, there's a loud laughter coming from the ceiling as the party crashers break in through the skylight. They begin to shoot into the crowd, but Bruce quickly ducks amidst the chaos, going out an unguarded window, and then comes crashing back in through the skylight, taking out the party crashers. But he realizes that something is wrong. The party crashers got their tech from the Joker, who got it from Wayne Enterprises, and without the Joker here to supply them, something's up. This can't be their plan. So with nothing else to go on, he goes back to work making access points across the city, a series of micro Batcaves, allowing him to always have something that he can use when something breaks out into the city. The ramifications of the Joker War are that the Joker got rid of most of Bruce's money. He still has millions, but he's no longer in the trillions. So he doesn't have a helipad or a massive subterranean garage that fits 20 Bat vehicles. So he had to diversify by making these mini Bat caves. And after another night of toiling in the sewers, Bruce returns to his Fort Gray apartment, with one of his neighbors, Lydia, running up yelling, "Hello, neighbor!" She hugs him from behind, asking how lovely it is, and Bruce tells her, "Lovely. Just lovely." She tells him good, but she's having a little neighborhood party tonight and he should come. He tries to tell her that he's actually going to call it an early night, but Lydia tells him that she won't accept no for an answer, plus everyone feels safer when they know their neighbors, right? So make sure he brings a treat. Bruce goes to the party and he scans the area for all of those in attendance. First there was Lydia, daughter of Brian Warren III, studied art history, runs communications for her father's company. Next is Sam Turn and his wife Sarah Worth. Sarah is the daughter of the man who built most of Lower Gotham. Sam runs a tech company that speeds up data transfer. This is his third startup in just as many years. Finally is Deb Donovan, one of the last decent reporters in Gotham. She might also hate Bruce Wayne. But after finally finding a way to sneak back out, Bruce heads out on patrol. Whatever the mayor thinks is Gotham's vigilante problem, Gotham's ecosystem is shifting. New crews are scrambling to get on top of the new crime food chain after the Joker War. This raid was disorganized and loud. What crew heists a gala and takes phones instead of jewelry? This was a chance for the party crashers to put on a show, for a new investor, for a new boss. And the next step in this initiation is always going to be more violent. So time to bring an end to the party crashers. So while Batman is clearing out the party crashers' hideout, there's a knock all the way back in his apartment building on Sarah Worth's door. However, something isn't adding up. There's something else. Something that Batman isn't seeing. Something bigger than the Joker waiting, and he can feel it. So as morning comes, Bruce heads back to his apartment when he hears screaming coming out of Sam and Sarah's place. He runs over since the couple's apartment is destroyed, and Sam is panicking. He yells at the police asking what they're doing standing around. They have to find his wife. And Deb hears the shouting asking what's going on, and Bruce tells her that it's Sarah. She's gone. Has the nightmare arrived on the elite's front door and exacted its price? But below the streets and in the sewers, Nakano's own personal aide, Neil, walks through with his sleeves rolled up and his hands covered in blood. But while the police got all of the information from Sam that they could, Bruce started trying to put together the pieces of what happened. Most people watch cop shows and how they talk about having this window of finding someone who's gone missing. But cops are fiction. The truth is that when people go missing in Gotham, they're never coming back. But normally with big targets, a ransom isn't too far behind, and in Sarah's case, there was nothing. She's just missing. Batman monitored the police radio and the emergency lines, and he heard that some of the city workers had found a manhole cover that had been tampered with. But with that being his only lead, Batman quickly descended into the sewers below. However, it didn't take him long to find what he was looking for and to really solidify what he said earlier. When you go missing in Gotham, you're not coming back. Batman tells Sarah, "I'm so sorry." He shines the light on her body, asking how long she's been here. How long has she been dead? It hasn't been long, but why her and why here? Hidden but not hidden. Even Gotham's police would eventually. But at that moment, the sound of splashing water can be heard as Gotham's finest begins to charge through the scene. Before Batman even has a chance to turn, the GCPD officers begin to shoot at what they think is their suspect. They're plowing right through the crime scene, making it much harder to catch the killer. All in the name of catching a vigilante threat. Batman doesn't know if they're here for him, the killer, or they're just going insane, and he has no time to find out. As the bullets are flying, one manages to hit Batman in the shoulder, and then another ricochets coming back and hitting the officer. The issue now is that it would seem that Batman is fleeing from the scene of the crime while injuring an officer. Not a good look for vigilantism, and not a good look for the mayor's attack on superheroes. The next day, the who's who of the city come to pay their respects for the loss of Sarah. But the tone completely shifts as Sarah's father steps up to the podium. He tells everyone that someone in the city took his daughter. Someone in the city took his daughter, and until he knows who, he has no words of mourning, no words of loss for anyone to hear. There's nothing to say but this: his daughter is gone, and nothing is right until he has justice. Sarah's murder is Gotham's 10th in the last 2 months. Are Gotham's crime families flexing? Is there a shakeup of power? Mayor Nakano does appear to be using it in some way, and the mayor needs his connections. But while the wound of Sarah's death festers, her partner Sam left the funeral early and disappeared. He hasn't shown up to work in days, and Deb spotted him leaving Sarah's apartment with only a gun. Batman approached him. He could tell that Sam was unhinged, something in his eyes, something other than agony for the loss of his lover. And after turning Sam into the police, his rage seemed unnatural. What's more is that at 5 a.m. this morning, a rush order was made to fill the southwest tunnel under 1st Street with concrete, which also just happens to be the location of Sarah Worth's murder. Forensics have already been delayed because the site was declared a health hazard by the city, and now the whole tunnel is concrete. What are they hiding? What is going on? The final nail in the coffin of any possible physical evidence that might be found on location is done, with concrete being poured into the crime scene. Why obstruct the investigation that will make the case for justice? Does Sarah's death have a connection to the mayor or to a cop? What are they trying to cover up? Batman needs to figure this out, because something about this whole thing is strange. But before Bruce goes into his apartment after thinking about all of this, he notices someone across the street, and as he takes a closer look, he sees the lifeless corpse of Sarah shuffling towards him. He tries to ask if it's her, but down the sidewalk, his neighbor Lydia sees and calls out asking if it's Sarah. Bruce hears her and quickly grabs the supposedly dead woman, pulling her inside. And as the door closes, Sarah's body begins to what can only be described as melting away in Bruce's arms. When he sets her down, he asks, "Clayface? No, it can't be Clayface. You've been gone ever since the Gotham Knights program was disbanded." And Sarah weakly says, "Please." But before Bruce could think any further, Lydia bangs on his door, yelling for Bruce to open up. What the hell is he doing? She's calling the police. She knows that she saw Sarah. So a short while later, the two cops are knocking at Bruce's door, and he opens up asking if he can help them. Lydia yells, asking, "What is this, a social call? Go in!" But Bruce asks if there seems to be a problem. The officers barge in, stating that they have reasons to suspect that he is holding someone against their will. And as the officers look around, Bruce tells them that there is no one here but him. But if they have any concerns, they are free to look around his home. Lydia follows in, stating that she heard someone screaming. And Bruce says that he did have the television turned up, and he didn't mean to disturb anyone. After a few moments, the officers leave, stating that they are sorry to bother him. They'll see themselves out. And as the door shuts, Bruce looks back into the living room at the bag. He unzips it, seeing the clay person, asking how they ended up here, and who are they? The night falls and Bruce suits up, quietly sneaking out, but his neighbor Lydia is still watching. As she leaves, Lydia walks out, calling out to him, not realizing that he is out on the roof, and then hears someone calling out to her. She looks back and Neil Betterman grabs her by the arm and Lydia asks, "Neil, what are you doing here? Are you wasted? You're hurting me." But before we can see what's going on with that, Bruce did leave as Batman and he sets his bag down when he hears someone calling to him stating that they need to talk. He looks back asking, "Do you?" And he sees Huntress aiming her crossbow at his face. "Yes, we do. And whatever you're reaching for, I promise that I'm a faster shot than you. Now why don't you just tell me what's in the bag before I take off one of your rubber ears?" Just then, the clay person Sarah breaks out of the bag, spilling over the ledge, and Huntress asks, "Did you have Clayface in the bag?" "I'm not completely sure who that is. Might be Lady Clayface." As the two follow, Huntress says that is not okay, but why does that clay person look like Sarah Worth, the dead woman? Sarah begins to reform on the ground, and as a passing man asks if she's okay, she turns back screaming, "Don't touch me!" and lashes out. Batman barely manages to save the man from getting hit, but Sarah begins to disperse herself, flooding the city, slamming Batman and Huntress into a wall. Batman yells for her to stop this, and she shouts back, "Let me go!" Huntress begins to pull herself out of the clay. "I can't kill you with a crossbow, right?" asking for a friend. Sarah screams again as she dissolves from the coming rain into the sewers, and Batman and Huntress begin to follow, with Batman asking, "Who are you?" Sarah looks up. "I am Lady Clayface." Batman kneels down, holding out his hand, stating, "I want to take you somewhere safe. You might have the answers that I'm looking for." And later, over at Micro Cave 7A, Huntress tells him that it's a nice place, but it's not a mansion. Batman ignores her, asking Lady Clayface what does she remember, and she tells him that she was at Arkham serving for a conspiracy charge. Then she was attacked and there was poison and then nothing. After it, she wasn't human. She couldn't make herself take form. She felt herself flowing away from Arkham underground. For how long, she doesn't know. And then they were there, the man and her. She was crying and screaming and begging him. She said, "Kneel." Huntress asks, "Kneel?" He made her kneel. And Lady Clayface says that she can't. She's tired. Batman then asks, "Do you mean Neil?" Sarah knew a man named Neil Betterman, tracing his cell right now. Once he has the signal, Batman and Huntress set out, but Neil is on top of a building and something is in his eye. He falls to his knees screaming and then falls onto his back and stops breathing. Huntress arrives looking at the fleshy things wiggling out of his eye sockets, asking, "What is that?" "I don't know, but we should probably keep our distance until we find out. However, it doesn't explain why you've been following me." Huntress tells him that a friend of her, Mary Knox, was murdered violently. And while she was investigating, she found 4 other similar cases. And then she saw Sarah Worth's case and heard a police call about Bruce Wayne. "You thought Sarah's murder might be with the mob. There's a few factions, including Penguin, making a move to control the crime scene, but this isn't the mob. Did whatever killed Sarah Worth kill Neil? Sarah died of blunt force trauma. This isn't blunt force. There's blood on his hands." Meanwhile, back at Fort Gray Apartments, Deb Donovan goes out for a cigarette when she sees a bloody bag laying on the streets. She gets closer, asking, "Lydia? Lydia!" The next day, the sun begins to rise and Huntress begins to process the scene of Neil Betterman when Barbara radios into Batman that he might have to come back home. There's major activity going on. Bruce rushes to take off his costume, and when he gets home, he sees Deb and a group of police officers. He asks what's going on, and Deb says that the police are looking for him. Someone reported hearing Lydia talking to him last night. Is that true? What are you talking about? Lydia is dead. Lydia was murdered, Bruce. 2 women from this neighborhood, your neighborhood, murdered in less than a month. But before Bruce could ask any further, officers walk up telling him that they would like to ask him a few questions. A short while later, at the precinct, the detectives tell Bruce that they appreciate him coming in. They just have a few things that they want to go over with him. Where was he last night? They have reports that he and Lydia were arguing. Bruce tells them, "Well, I was in my apartment and then went out with a friend. I saw her yesterday afternoon, but the police then came to my house. It was a misunderstanding. Lydia thought that she saw Sarah Worth, but Sarah is dead." When detective asks if he can give the name of his alibi, "Yeah, I'll have to get you her name from my phone, or call her for her name." But while Bruce is held for questioning, Barbara comes back with information to Huntress about Neil. She found a bunch of cases of ocular discharge that were the result of a parasite, and from what she's been putting together, this is quite possibly concerning. She found 10 cases that look exactly like the images that were sent in, including a sample from Sarah's boyfriend who died in the hospital after the attack and ER doc. The strange part is that all of these medical anomalies started showing up around the same time as there was a huge uptick in violent attacks in Gotham. All of these parasitic cases were fatal as well. But while Huntress tries to gather more information across the city, Mayor Nakano's aide, Hugh Vile, steps out of the office to get something to eat. He walks, he sees a man in an alleyway yelling in his phone, and when the man turns back, he asks, "You want a picture or something?" Hugh says no pictures. And the man tells him that he can mind his own business, so Hugh walks closer. "This is my business. This is what I do." And as Hugh smiles, her eyes begin to turn green as her mouth begins to rip apart and a large parasite crawls out. Back at the precinct, Bruce is now placed into a holding cell. "Don't you think that this is a bit extreme? Can I call my lawyer at least?" And the officer tells him that there's a hold on that for a moment. Just sit tight and they'll be with him shortly. However, something seems odd to Bruce. He calls out to the officers, but no one answers, like everyone has left the building. And then he looks up at the security camera and sees that it's focusing its lenses on him. So it means someone is watching. With a few taps to his watch, he manages to get into the security system and project the feed onto the wall. What he sees is Roland Worth stepping out of his car with a rocket launcher. And a second later, there's a massive explosion with Worth beginning to laugh. He stares at the fire, smiling wide. Justice! In the debris of the wreckage, Bruce coughs, lifting himself up as he sees Worth walking towards him. Worth screams his name, and Bruce tells him, "I didn't kill Sarah!" Worth then pulls out a large gun and begins to fire. "You're scum! You took my daughter from me! You took what was mine!" Bruce scrambles to get away, but Huntress arrives, telling Barbara that the station is totaled. "Do you have any visuals on Batman?" Barbara tells her no. The shockwave took out a few blocks worth of cameras. He might have gone underground. And Bruce did just that, sneaking into one of the nearby sewers, opening the door to one of his micro caves. And it's not long when there's a thundering thum that can be heard as Worth jumps down asking, "Do you think you can get away? Rat scum scurrying into your little hole! Do you think that I won't blow up this whole city until you're dead? You're wrong!" And after a few moments, Worth begins to walk around asking, "Where is he?" And in costume, Bruce punches him. "I'm right here!" Worth yells that he wants that scum Wayne. He killed his daughter. "Tell me where he is!" And Batman tells him that Bruce Wayne did not kill his daughter, and neither did he. "Why would I believe the words of a coward hiding behind the mask? Give me Wayne." Worth punches down with his massive fist, telling him to get out of the way, and then he grabs his rocket launcher, firing it above Batman's head. The rocket explodes, and Batman begins to run through the sewer, trying to stay ahead of the blast, while the whole sewer system comes crashing down around him. But once clear, Batman jumps back, delivering an uppercut to knock Worth out. And as he falls, he ends up firing another rocket straight up into the air. The blast blows a hole into the street, with Worth charging in, grabbing Batman. "Do you think you could fight back? This sewer is going to be your final resting place, Bat!" But up above, Huntress manages to get on the scene to help a biker from falling into the hole that was now created. The woman yells that is the third bike that she lost in a month, and Huntress tells her, "Welcome to Gotham." And then she catches Worth holding Batman. But before she could jump down to join the battle, Batman and Worth hear someone calling out, and Lady Clayface shuffles through the smoke. Worth drops Batman. "Sarah! Sarah!" But before he could reach her, Batman fires the grappling hook, wrapping it around his arm, and as he stops before Lady Clayface, he asks, "What is this?" Lady Clayface begins to melt and transform into the water. Worth begins to grab at the water, asking, "Where's my daughter? What happened to my little girl?" But after that moment, Worth decided to turn himself in. Batman brought him in without issues, but he was released minutes later. And after that was done, Huntress brought Batman to her apartment, telling her that it's not Wayne Manor, but it's pretty cushy if he asks her. Batman sits down sighing, stating that Worth isn't going to stop until he sees both Bruce Wayne and Batman in body bags. Huntress asks if he thinks that Worth has any connections to the other victims, and Bruce Wayne tells her no. What they saw in Neil Betterman's eyes says part of this puzzle is biological. If it's a virus, it could spread far beyond the current cases. It seems more likely that there's something attacking people individually. Huntress says, so they're looking for the epicenter, a main bug. Batman says that Sarah, Lydia, Neil, and Sam, 4 people connected to whatever this is. What's the other link? Sarah's body was discovered, and within a day the area was flooded with concrete. Someone would need access to city contracts to make that happen. Could be Neil Betterman. Could be another connection to the mayor's office. Just then, Barbara buzzes in asking if they're watching the news. Worth just did the shortest stint in jail in Gotham history, and he's now holding a press conference. Batman and Huntress turn on the TV to find Worth stating that Bruce Wayne and his protector Batman, "Do you two think you can take me for a ride? Do you see me now? You're both dead." Elsewhere, Penguin is watching that same conference smiling. "Now this is interesting. I believe that it's time to return Mr. Worth's phone call." Huntress turns back to Batman asking what is the plan, and he tells her that since Bruce Wayne is wanted and Batman is on Worth's list, they'll wait until dark. Meanwhile, they need to look into the recent civic hires. Who has the reins of Nakano's office? And if he's right, it will be someone new, someone on the outside moving in. Meanwhile, back over at the police station, once the cameras stop, Hugh Vile walks in stating that he would like to express his condolences. His name is Hugh. He works in the mayor's office. Worth tells him to tell Nakano to stay out of his way. But Hugh says actually he isn't representing Mayor Nakano's interests. He's interested in him. He may want help with Mr. Wayne. Worth grabs Hugh, pushing him into his car, telling the driver to go, and then pulls a gun, telling Hugh to talk. Later that night at the mayor's office is a knock at the door, and Deb Donovan opens the door stating, "Mr. Vile? Mind turning on the lights? Not sure why we're meeting at midnight in complete darkness." Hugh says that he appreciates her coming so late. He wanted to meet with her to give her an exclusive story. Deb tells him to get the mayor. She's going to check in with her office But before he could finish, Hugh charges at her with a fire extinguisher. Just then, Batman gets a message from Deb calling for help. Batman traces where the signal came from and states that this is a trap. Not Worth's though. Worth is a blunt instrument. Whoever's behind this wants her to be found. So as Batman and Huntress get into the tunnels, Batman sees Deb tied up next to a bomb, but notices several more spread throughout the tunnels. Batman and Huntress get to work disarming the bombs, but as Batman unties Deb, she tells him that there is something in the office. Before Batman realizes that a hidden bomb goes off, and Worth watches. Kaboom! Hugh smiles as he watches the fire burn. As the explosions go off, Hugh Vile begins to laugh. He thinks back to his childhood when he was an ordinary boy until he saw something else entirely. He was a little boy who was always hungry but couldn't eat because of it. The thing inside of him. It is him, and that thing causes him to feed, and it feeds on what it craves, violence. He first came to the city as a child to see the doctors at Gotham General. His mother said that he got sick swimming in a watering hole the summer that he turned 8, which is when she first noticed his mood swings. How he can be ravenous, she said, and not a bite to eat because it wasn't food that he wanted. The doctors tried to kill the foreign fungal infection that he supposedly had with drugs, but nothing worked. The doctor shined a light in his eyes, and the creature hated it. They said that he needed to get stronger to fight it. But Hugh only knew one way that he would get stronger, and that was by protecting it, so that it could get stronger, so that they could get stronger. And he learned what it needed. He learned how to listen to its hunger until its voice became his voice. His mother told him that Gotham City was going to hell. Perhaps that's why it was so easy to produce his victims. And after finding his first victim, he sent them to his next victim. And that's the cycle. That's how Hugh Vile fed, with the parasite inside of him, using them as extensions of his hunger out in the world. But back with our current predicament, Batman and Huntress pull Deb out looking for a place to go, but Deb grabs a shard of glass, stabbing it into Batman's side. Huntress quickly grabs her, wondering what's going on, and sees that her eyes are turning green because she is infected. She is an extension of Hugh Vile. But then Worth yells that he doesn't like to do things twice. And this is the last time that I'm going to kill you. Batman ducks under the oncoming bullets, telling him, "I'm sick of fighting this battle with you." Worth swings, asking, "Do you think you're going to get away with hiding the man who murdered my daughter? This ends when you and Wayne are corpses." But Barbara yells over the comms that Nakano just called out a city-wide state of emergency, that a lot of Gotham's worst are coming out onto the streets. She has a name for what is causing this, the source of the infections, and if Barbara's research is right, his name is Hugh Vile. Deb Donovan logged a call from him before she disappeared. Huntress is shocked. Vile? That's totally a villain name. No one made that connection. Barbara goes on stating that one of the hospitals has a new victim and they got a sample from his eye and they did some tests and now they're treating him with a combo of antibiotics and UV rays. Seems whatever it is light sensitive. And it looks like Vile is downtown, which is, yeah, in the middle of this mess. Nightwing is down there and so are the Batgirls. Over with Batman, Worth is standing up, wiping the blood from his mouth. You should know, once my mind is made up, it never changes, Batman. As the thugs begin to walk out to help Worth, Batman says, and you will never know justice. But while Batman is fighting against Worth, Huntress follows Barbara's lead where she finds Hugh Vile seemingly waiting for her. Huntress tells him that she needs to discuss something with him. It's about a missing reporter. And he casually looks at her. I see. Well, given the time, I would say that your missing reporter is dead. End of discussion. But if you want, you can cuff me and take me in. But you won't find an ounce of evidence. But you're welcome to try. She grabs her cuffs, telling him that he should know that if he tries to move on her, she's going to inflict a considerable amount of pain. Wonderful. And he opens up his mouth with the parasite beginning to crawl out. And Huntress calls out to Barbara. But it's too late. Hugh latches onto her, trying to infect her, and then stops. Hugh falls over as Huntress pulls out the knife that she plunged into his chest. What have you done? Huntress falls to the ground coughing, and the parasite begins to crawl out of her mouth. Back with Batman. These are Penguin's thugs. That's who you're teaming up with now, Worth? That's who the man who owns half of Gotham turns to in his time of need, bouncers and thieves. I turn to whoever gets the job done, Batman. Batman steps back. Violence took your daughter, and it won't bring her back. Worth holds up his gun. Goodbye. And Batman flicks his wrist, throwing a small explosive charge at the cement truck. The explosion causes it to burst, pouring its concrete onto Worth, trapping him in place. And then a bolt shoots by, grazing Batman's arm, and he turns back to see the infected Huntress. Hugh watches through her eyes. Even as the blood is draining from my body, I can still have my puppets. Batman fires his grappling hook to bind Huntress, but she uses her knife to cut the cord, lunging in. She pins Batman to the ground while Hugh whispers in her ear to do it. This one will make me feel strong. Put your blade into his throat. Batman grabs something from his belt, and as he holds it up, he flips a switch, shining a light into her eyes, blinding Hugh. And with it all said and done, Huntress was free of the parasite's grasp. Worth managed to escape. Hugh Vile went missing, and those infected are now in a stable condition as there is a way to treat it. Huntress responded to the treatments as well. But they have other problems. Because now it looks like a few up-and-coming gangs are taking advantage of the situation, so yeah. Everything in Gotham is kind of a mess after the Joker War, and what is Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, going to do? Barbara asks him this very question. If we're gonna move forward, I need to be able to pursue Hugh Vile without the police going after both Bruce Wayne and Batman. I'm going to turn myself in, Barbara. And that is where the story of Detective Comics goes at this point. It's moving into a whole new storyline, which takes place during a period when Batman didn't have a lot of money because of the Joker War. And if you want to see how this continues, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Thank you guys so much for your continued support, and I'll see you next time right here at Comicstorian.